Resisting Satan. We must be on guard against all of Satan's tactics, but especially the temptation to be prideful. Here's Gene to explain.
I don't think it's an accident that he immediately exhorts everyone to be humble and on guard against Satan. Notice 1 Peter 5, 8, and 9. Be sober. Be on the alert. Your adversary, the devil, is prowling around like a roaring lion, looking for anyone he can devour, especially if you're proud and arrogant. I think that's the implication in context. Resist him. He doesn't have to defeat you. Firm in the faith, knowing that the same sufferings are being experienced by your brothers in the world. And again, I think Peter reflected back as he wrote those words when Jesus said, after he said, if all forsake you, I will not. Jesus said, Simon, Simon. Now that's significant. Remember the first time that Simon Peter met Jesus? His name was Simon, son of Jonas. And Jesus said, I'm going to change your name to Peter, which means rock. Now, when Peter in his arrogance said, if all forsake you, I won't. And I think he was sincere. You can be very sincere in your arrogance. Anytime that Peter failed, if you look back through the Gospels, you will see that Jesus would revert to his original name and call him Simon rather than Peter. And here he gives him a double dose. Simon, Simon, look out. And in essence, I think we could say, what's happening to my rock? My rock is crumbling. Simon, Simon, look out. Satan has asked to sift you like wheat. But here's the good news. I have prayed for you that your faith may not fail. And when you have turned back, strengthen your brothers. Who are your brothers? The other apostles. And that's what we saw happening there on the Sea of Galilee by that shore. They're going to need strength because they're going to fail. They're all going to scatter. But I've prayed for you, and ultimately your faith will not fail, regardless of what you've done. So when you return, strengthen your brothers. The amazing thing here is that James underscores basically the same thing. It's almost a parallel passage. God resists the proud. He gives grace to the humble. Therefore, submit to God. Resist the devil. Here's the good news. He will flee. Doesn't have to be victorious. Draw near to God, obviously with humility, and he'll draw near to you. Cleanse your hands, sinners. Purify your hearts, double-minded people. And here's another good news, word of encouragement. Jesus is praying for every one of us at this very moment. He said to Peter, I prayed for you. He's still praying for all of us. In Romans it says, who is the one who condemns? Christ Jesus is the one who died, but even more has been raised. He also is at the right hand of God and intercedes for us. When you have failed, he's saying, by implication, and when you turn back, strengthen your brothers. We all fail. And that's why it's wonderful to have a great high priest who understands that. Well, the final question, though tempting Christians to be prideful is one of Satan's primary goals, and I believe it is, what other tactics does he use to attempt to defeat God's people? Well, in 1 Corinthians 10:12, we read, therefore, whoever thinks he stands must be careful not to fall. What's the essence of that statement? It's pride, isn't it? That's where Satan wants to get us, just like he got to Peter. But if you look at the context, you'll see that he's talking about the children of Israel. And the result of their arrogance was idolatry, where they began to worship false gods. That is anything before God. Immorality. was a part of that if you read the context of that statement in 1 Corinthians. Rationalization, that is, not taking responsibility for our actions. What is the first thing that happens when we make a mistake? We try to think in terms of, who can I blame? This can't be my fault. Boy, isn't that a natural tendency? But what God is saying to each one of us, one of the great ways to defeat Satan is take responsibility for our actions. Put the blame where it belongs. If we failed, we need to blame ourselves and go from there. See, it's pride that causes us to look for another reason rather than taking responsibility for our actions. That's just a human response. Got a call, actually an email from a very close friend this week who made a mistake. And he actually literally forgot that he made the mistake. And when he was confronted with the fact that he had made this mistake, he denied that he had made the mistake until he went back and checked his emails and found out that he'd forgot that he'd made the mistake. What was he going to do with that? Well, he was so pricked in his conscience that he said, you know, I'm not sure I'm responsible to be in the position that I'm in. And he wrote to a number of us and said, am I really responsible? Can I continue in this? And he just was open. Here's the mistake I made. And the thing that bothers me, he said, I forgot that I made the mistake. And several of us wrote back to him and said, in view of all the responsibility that's on you and all the things that you're trying to do, and I know the whole situation, I said it was a human error. But in my book, you've just gone up many notches by taking responsibility for your actions. I talked to him by phone today, and I told him that again, not just an email, but on the phone. I said, you took responsibility for your mistake. Put it behind you and move on, because we need your leadership. And so I think Peter is really addressing some of these issues with these believers. As believers, we must be on guard against all of Satan's tactics, but especially the temptation to be prideful. And that's where Peter ends this epistle. But in a short time later, he turned around and wrote a second epistle. And that's what we're going to look at next week. Probably wrote this second epistle a short time before he was martyred for the cause of Jesus Christ.